Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Kolossal Plays here from Kolossal HQ. I'm Chris Hamm, the lead developer for Kolossal Games, and today we have a special edition of Kolossal Plays where we are joined by Scott Almes, the designer of Almanac, The Dragon Roads, and many other games I'm sure you're familiar with. And we're going to be doing a little bit of a Q&A, so certainly feel free to shoot us your questions in the chat, as well as just discussing a few prepared things and recapping some of our interactions as we worked on Almanac together. So welcome, Scott. This is your first visit to our wonderful little streams we do here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, happy to be here. Yeah, first time on our stream, so it's gonna be good stuff.
Welcome to the massive platform we have here as our broadcast professionals. So while we give people a chance to get into the chat, we can just start off. I noticed one of my favorite questions I've seen on the Kickstarter page, which of course, by the way, Almanac, The Dragon Roads is on Kickstarter right now. We're in the last few days, so certainly feel free to zoom over there and take a look. But I liked, and I noticed we both answered the question as to what sort of game storybook type things that we played before that led to the inspiration for this game, or in my case, familiarity working on it with you. So that seems like a good place to start while we get some people in here, if you want to go back over that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Almanac really began with just like a little bit of a nerdy love for maps and like different fantasy books and games. I could very distinctly remember, opening up the first copy of Lord of the Rings I had and seeing the map at the beginning and being like, oh man, where are we going to go here? Like, we're going to get to see all the corners of this map. And remember some also old school video games like Morrowind, The Elder Scrolls. Whenever I got that Xbox game for the first time, right in front of the rulebook was this giant map that you got to unravel, and you're like, oh, what adventures ahead do you have? And
man, if you're old enough as me, Dragon Warrior from the Nintendo back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Opening up that. So I love me a good fantasy map as well.
Oh yeah, I mean that's kind of the downside of like downloading games nowadays. You can't get that big this map to unfold, and you'll have to like put it on the wall and really like explore everything.
The computer game manufacturers need to listen and make printable ones, right? Like print your own, download your own fantasy map for the world, and hang it on your wall for retro gamers. As I mentioned myself, I was thinking more of when I thought of it from the game book world. Like I played, of course, Choose Your Own Adventures and the Lone Wolf series of books. I don't know if you were ever familiar with those, but they were big with the grade school book fairs when I was getting into reading and stuff. And so they were similar adventure game books and things along those lines that really when I was like, oh man, Choose Your Own Adventure or Path or Pick Your Path, things like that. First time I played Almanac, I was like, oh, okay, here we go. This is good stuff. So similar lover of maps, and that was my game book intro and whatnot. So Bayer, have we got anybody asking any questions over there?
Not quite yet, but there was a question that I saw on Kickstarter. Regarding Rahdo's one criticism of this game, which was the die rolling for the encounters. The question was, have you considered, or during development, did you consider a diceless variant?
Okay. Scott, were you able to hear that? Or
yeah, so the question was about, so whenever you're facing some fight encounters, you'll have to roll a die in order to resolve whether or not you win that fight or not. And that was one of Rahdo's question, because he's not the biggest fan of dice all the time, for sure. And yeah, so we definitely did explore some variants that had no dice in it whatsoever. And part of the reasons why I like that die being in there is because it does give a little bit of uncertainty to fighting encounter. One of the nice things about Almanac is not every encounter is a big monster to face. There's all kinds of different things to explore. But whenever the fighting came up, if it was very deterministic, it took a little bit of the fun out of it, as far as like really feeling like you're battling something. If you had an assured win, that's not really how things went in like exploring in like D&D and things like that. Like you always have that chance for a critical fail. So that's one of like the more risks you can take during the game. There's a lot, if you love your Euro game stuff, there's a lot of things you can really set up perfectly and will work out for you. But whenever it comes to fighting, I wanted to make sure there's still a little bit of risk in there, because that really bring out like the thematic flavor to actually having to fight creatures or, you know, bands of robbers or dragons and things like that.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I tend to normally come down on the not a big fan of dice and random combat myself, but I agree with you that it fits the tone and theme of a whimsical fantasy adventure. Additionally, there is a lot of randomness in Almanac, but it is not, that does not denote a lack of skillful opportunity for skillful play, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you want to be somewhat protected from the influence of those fights, then don't bid high for guide, right? Mm-hmm. Like allow people to shield you or things like that. And as far as the consideration it was given in development, that was actually related to that, was part of the reason for you, myself, and Travis agreeing to attach some fame to the guards toward the end, so that mm-hmm. not only is there a certain degree of randomness whether you will encounter fights, or even if you take the preparation with guards to prepare for them and you may still lose, the action of acquiring the guards along with certain things that can augment them still result in points offsetting mm-hmm. that randomness to some degree. So, you know, the acquisition of guards may not be always super valuable, but it will always provide the one fame per, and greatly enhance your opportunities of winning the fight you encounter. I mean, effectively taking it down to a 1 in 6 opportunity of losing. So I think it was taken into consideration both in design and development, and it's offset sufficiently for the weight and theme of the game.
Oh yeah, there's definitely ways to avoid fights if you're not willing to take the risk. You can, not get the guide token, as you mentioned, is one of them. And a lot of the encounters themselves have alternate paths than fighting a creature. So
exactly, where so it is most risky to someone who does pursue a heavy guard strategy along with guide, wishing to dominate that. However, that 5-to-1 risk is still a pretty strong chance of winning, in particular because it denies the other benefits to the other players. I actually seldom dominate guide when I play, but I have seen people accumulate a large number of guards and dominate guide, and they just, if they're able to defeat a chain of monsters in front of you, they reap all the benefits from the encounters. So I think it's pretty well adjusted, although it may seem a little more random than it actually is.
Yeah. Well, another nice thing about it is it stands itself apart from some of the other paths to victory in the game. Mm-hmm. Because you can go like heavy contract, you can go heavy buy and sell as you go, and then you can focus on trying to get a lot of rewards from becoming the guide and those fight encounters and things like that. So another nice thing about the dice is it feels distinctly different than those other more Euro paths to victory.
Mm-hmm. Byron?
Yeah. So when you were designing the different maps, what was your process for keeping them interesting but not complex?
Oh, that's a good question. So the question being, how did I make them interesting and not complex? Well, the first answer to that is I made them way too complex at first. And things went poorly.
There's an honest game designer answer right there.
Yeah. Because even just peeling back the curtain a little bit more, the original rule set for like whenever I first started designing on it, every time you visit a new location, it added a rule that was permanently changed in the game. So every time you went to a new location, you had a new puzzle and they started to stack on each other. And it was so hard to manage, way too complicated, and not nearly enough benefit. It's also very hard to make a good rule set that scaled so randomly.
You're making my skin crawl over here.
Yeah, so luckily, before I submitted it to you guys, I took that out. Otherwise, you'd probably still be working on tweaking it. And we wouldn't be on Kickstarter right now.
For sure.
But yeah, it was a very hard, because wanted each place to feel very distinct. Wanted to make sure, the floating island feels very different than, the caverns or the monastery and things like that. Like they all should feel very distinct. But yeah, it was always a bit of a struggle to make sure it didn't feel too complicated, and also make sure if there was any kind of setup that wasn't too much. I know that's something we worked on development too, that even making sure that each one, once you opened up the page, you're ready to like get in there and start having fun, and you didn't have to like pause the game for 5 minutes and set up a new map. So yeah, it was a lot of times game designs are rather building on something or trimming it away, and making sure we got to the right complexity level. Definitely had a lot more trimming away than adding.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned keeping the distinctness of the locations, because I would say, the tendency for a game like this or a game book or something, people are inclined to think of it as a narrative. I think Byron and I were talking about this the other day, and what's interesting is there is no specific story in Almanac other than you're going from, the outpost to the Dragon City. Okay. But it is the random elements of the encounters and things like that actually you are creating your own narrative, visiting these different places, right? And if you built on each one, it's actually the individual game itself that is building on each one. Your own personal experience is building it, and your position within the game, like your goods or your guards or your special tokens and whatnot, develop that narrative. But by only having that as the overlap, it really does that. I think that's what actually lends to the sense of traveling, because as you said, it keeps each place distinct. And that's important, so that they don't all feel the same or it all blurs together. And by extension, in a game where you go to a different one, you will have that separate memory of that game. And so I think that that's a really important, element that you're not going to find that in the rule book, right? Yeah. It's not going to be explained or anything, but it is the experience aspect of it. And it's not even choosing your own adventure, because they're not pre-written. It's literally making your own adventure, which is one of the best things about games, and so in this, I'm a big fan of the Vineland tract, cross combos. And of course because I come from being a hardcore gamer background, I love the ones with the other combos like Wizard's Hollow and things like that. But I don't usually get to play the games very much after they're beautiful. And the last week or the week before, when Byron and I played, and I finally got to play Subland Salt on the actual map,
it's so good,
with all the art and diving down, I was like, this feels so good, And even though I didn't win that game where our friend Daniel won, I still have positive memories of it.
Yeah, it is.
Kind of follow-up question to that was, are there any boards in particular that you like? Do you have a favorite board? Do you have a favorite board
or a couple, Scott? I think I know the answer to some of this.
Oh yeah, I normally have to say Skygate as like my favorite board. Yeah, it's because it's like pretty sure. I mean, memory is a little hazy for how long this game's been in development, things like that. But I'm pretty sure it's the first map I really fleshed out, because floating islands are just so cool to me. So I mean, you might even say like the whole game was built around just to have a floating island. But yeah, that's a big one for me.
Nice. Yeah, Bayer has it up on the screen. I don't know if you can see it on your end as well, talking about it, but I knew you were going to say Skygate from some of our conversations, and then I believe you'd already mentioned floating island 2 or 3 times in this conversation as well. So I'm like, if I had to bet, money's on Skygate.
Yeah,
and that it's of course balancing the islands, which is, to me, it's funny because in some ways that seems so mechanical, and people be like, oh, that's just a Euro thing, but that is like, the mechanisms melding with theme, right? The idea, first off, the ludicrous notion of floating islands, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then that they might tip over on you in the sky if you're not careful. I mean, that is whimsy, brought to life. That is literally the kind of thing that you would expect in Alice in Wonderland or something like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so that's a cool one. I think the Subland Salt in its final form is gorgeous and fun and feels very thematic.
Mm-hmm.
So if I shut off my, my hardcore gamer side of my brain there for a minute, that's a really fun one. And I have a soft spot in my heart for Emperor Sands too.
Oh yeah,
building the pyramid. I tell you what, when we played on the stream, the 3-player game with Buyer Daniel and myself, man, oh man, Emperor Sands can be ruthless when all the players are deliberately trying to gouge each other out of any useful actions.
Yeah.
And of course, who doesn't like adding the camel to your actual caravan?
Yeah. It's interesting you just kind of mentioned because you talked a little bit about like making your story as you play the game and things like that. And I feel like whenever people like reflect on the game, that's really when like the emergent storytelling comes out, that the stuff that you can't see in a rule book. Because you'll be hear someone say like, yeah, when I got to like Skygate, I was able to like unload all my stuff for so much money right there. Mm-hmm. Or like I really got screwed over by that dire mole or things like that. Like they don't just say, oh, in round 2 I made a lot of gold or something like that. It's always like the story that happened on it. They talk about like, this is the location I was in. This is thematically what happened to me. And I mean, as far as the development process, whenever those kind of conversations started to come up at the end, that's when I knew the game was like really getting there. Whenever people were like reflecting on these like thematic moments as they come in and talk about, hey, we were really brutal in Emperor Sands as we were like trying to get ourselves stacked up. Like you would not place your workers where I needed you to work. You would not get me up there. Screwed me out of getting that camel.
Oh yeah. And I mean, again, as I certainly play very hard, and as a developer, I have to push the games to their limits and things like that. So we do that anyway. But one of the things I've loved about the Dragon Road since I first played it is, I mean, they talk about easy to learn, hard to master. I don't know that I would necessarily say hard to master because, this isn't chess, and we've discussed the certain elements that are random for various reasons. Mm-hmm. But you absolutely can play this game better or worse. I mean, it is a skill-based game, and all of the decisions, particularly how much you bid for things or bidding for guide or, how much value you can accumulate over time. I mean, I could have easily played this game when I was 8 to 10 years old, mm-hmm. And I would have enjoyed it. Just like, now as a brutal, dead inside, hardcore gamer, I can play it, and it scales up, right? Like it's still, it handles that audience, and still then provides that sense of whimsy. And there's very few games that I've played that I feel like scale from that very low entry point all the way up. One being Carcassonne, for example. Mm-hmm. I always use that as an example because one of my best friends, he's a maniac at that game, and he got to go play at Worlds.
Oh, nice.
And he flew over to us and played at Worlds, and there was like 34 people, and he finished 13th. And I go, so was it luck? Did you just get unlucky because there's random card and tile draw and stuff? And he goes, no, all 12 people who beat me were absolutely better than me at Carcassonne. Yeah. And so I feel like there's a certain element of that here in Almanac, the Dragon Road, that you will know at the end that person played better and why you won or lost, if that's what you're looking for in the game. So very satisfying thematically and mechanically for competitive players as well. Mm-hmm. Anything else over there, Bar?
Oh,
keep them coming.
Yeah, in could Scott talk a bit more about the inspiration or kind of if it was just a creation of his own for the bidding system or bid?
So talking about the bidding system?
Yes.
Which
Rado loved.
Yeah. Because unlike Rado, I will say that I actually love blind bidding.
I like some blind bidding myself, actually.
So I don't mind that. I mean, I know what negative feelings can come with blind bidding. I put out all this money and got like nothing or things like that. I understand the frustration, but for me, I actually don't mind that. But there's a lot of people. I have a hard time getting blind bidding games at the table because so many people dislike it that it'll just ruin the whole game. No matter if it's like 5% of the game, if there's blind bidding in it, that will be the number one reason they lost afterwards. So whenever I was approaching the guide on this one, I wanted to use some sort of blind bidding mechanism because I didn't want at the end of every map to take 5 minutes to do like an all-around auction with everyone upping themselves, counting what coins they had behind the screens. Like I wanted to keep things moving on it. So I knew I wanted to do blind bidding of some sort. And to get to a mechanic where people were okay with it, it just really took some trial and error. And, really thinking about like, well, the thing that really irritates people is whenever they have to completely overpay for something. So what if we had it so they'll never overpay? They'll always pay, whatever the lowest person says. How does that feel? And there's a couple variants of it that we tried, but I had to laugh whenever I saw Rado's review on that because his negative reaction to blind bidding is why I continue to work on that mechanism to get it where it's at today. It's because some people just hate it.
Man, it's so funny. It's so funny you say that you never overpay because that's only sort of true.
It is only sort of true, but hey, we're trying to see.
The funny thing is it's actually that creates some humorous moments, right? So when somebody gets a little too greedy about going first with the guide because they know they're just setting on the biggest stack of gold, and they're like, oh, I'll just throw out this big number, but then everybody else has caught on. The moment where everybody else bids like 15 or something, just creates those aha moments where we knew you were lording over us with all your gold, and so everybody sort of gave you the business. And I haven't actually seen any of the people who got caught in that situation be upset. They kind of have a knowing smirk on their face, like, okay, all right, So it creates that interesting tension without as much of the back end feel bad that Rado and it seems some other people have with blind bidding. So I've heard nothing but good things from the people that I've tested with regarding the bid system. And in fact, one of the things that you and I talked about in development and we went ahead and did was any version of bidding that takes place in the game now uses that same system. Yeah. It just made more sense anyway, so that people didn't have to learn multiples and we didn't have to explain multiples. So, you brought a good one to the table and we're just like, yeah, all of it does that now.
Yeah, and that did streamline things quite a bit.
We have a question in chat, which you guys kind of touched on already, but we want to just
sure
briefly recap. Is from Carlos. Do you guys think that Almanac has a big luck aspect to it?
Yeah, and I would not say it has a big luck to it by any means. There's certain random things that happen in the game. The encounter cards are randomized, what opportunities can come up, and then also what contracts come to you, things like that. All those are random, but I wouldn't say they're, you just have to strategize around them. There's not a lot of opportunities where you're going to, like if you get a different contract, it's not going to cause you to fail. It just means you have to start going after other goods and things like that. So the random elements are still very much in that like Euro game space as far as where I would, look at that like luck strategy curve.
Exactly. Like the way I would say it is, the luck does not affect your strategy because of course the strategy is your big picture. So perhaps you decide you want to play a small caravan with few wagons, pursue contracts. So yes, the luck may determine which contracts you get, But as long as you understand how your strategy works there, you just position yourself to adapt tactically to the opportunities that present themselves, as you said. So big picture, as long as you start to grasp how to position yourself, oh, I want to have the most wagons, I want to have a really long caravan, well, then you better be first, right? You better be towards the front of the guide a lot of times, because those spots will dry up, depending on the map you encounter. Depending on the demand for the path that you're trying to follow, your part of reducing that luck is positioning yourself to deal with the random factors. Mm-hmm. And so that is a form of skill in itself, is positioning yourself to cope with those random outcomes. And so overall, yes, there are random factors, but as your skill level increases, an entire portion of that is coping with that. And so I would say overall, it is a very skill-based game. Mm-hmm. Thanks for the question. Was it Carlos?
Carlos, yeah.
Thank you, Carlos.
So the game is set in the world of Belloria, mm-hmm. and we know that there is another game in Belloria, the Crystal Peaks. Are there plans to explore that world further?
Well, certainly we would love to do that. And obviously, the more successful the Almanac, the Dragon Road is on Kickstarter, and the Crystal Peaks down the road, we would love to do that. I mean, you think of an almanac or books such as that, you think of volumes, right? And so ideally, we would love to work with Scott on any number of future projects in both this world and perhaps any others he's capable of dreaming of.
Yeah, I would certainly more books in this area. I mean, if the fans are loving it enough that there's demand for more. I mean, I definitely want to explore this world more. And yeah, maybe some other ones, maybe some other books too. So.
Says the guy with a smirk that says he has other worlds in his mind.
Yeah. Is that a coy enough answer for like a Kickstarter Q&A?
Just enough.
Just enough.
Just enough. All right.
I feel like we asked you if Black Widow was coming back to the MCU after.
Yeah, or like when's Half-Life?
I can't really talk about it.
Yeah, when's Half-Life 3 coming out, right?
Yeah. There you go. So, what else, Byron?
We have a general question. What did Scott do before designing games?
Oh, look at that. Personal. What did you do before you got into designing games, Scott?
Or
do you have a day job besides designing games?
I do have a day job. Yeah. So I'm a mechanical engineer, focusing on product development. Worked in a bunch of different industries. I've done stuff for commercial nuclear power, done stuff in the nuclear navy, done stuff for the railroads. Right now I'm working with things like VR and artificial intelligence. Engineer of kind of all types, like jack of all engineers, I guess.
It's so funny when you said railroads shortly after discussing nuclear energy. I just wanted, all I could think of the rest of the time you're talking was nuclear trains. So there's your next game, Scott.
There we go.
Atomic rails or something.
Oh yeah.
That's it for the questions that I have.
Okay, so that's all the prepared questions and the ones we've received in the chat so far. Is there any thing special you would like to discuss, Scott, regarding Almanac the Dragon Road, or anything else right now?
I mean, I think we covered a lot of the real fun stuff, like, kind of how the game came to be. We talked a lot about like kind of the thematic journey to go on, and the stories you get to tell through it. So that was a big one I wanted to make sure we came across on this. Just give a shout out to Jackie Davis and how awesome her art is,
yes, right? For sure. I love it.
32 minutes into this, and we didn't mention her, which is wrong, because she did so good on this.
It just shows that my skills don't really lie in interviewing. So yeah, Jackie Davis is amazing, and we love her. And we are going to be working with her on more projects soon. So we're very excited, and she did a great job of bringing the world of Baluria to life in Almanac. So it's just amazing. And as you mentioned, the artist, like, Buyer laughs because he has talent in that regard. I have the imagination, but somewhere between my mind and my hand is a desert where all of the imagination dies before it can make it out of any sort of pen. So, no, I consider artists to practically be wizards. It's unbelievable.
When you saw my wonderful, wonderful prototypes that I submitted that were hand drawn and took like the maximum amount of ability I had.
So, yeah, well, sure. I don't know how big it is.
Just show it on your camera.
Sure.
I love this art.
Yeah, no, I agree. So this is Scott at his finest as an illustrator.
Yeah. Sharpen those colored pencils myself.
Yeah, let me put a. I'm not mocking.
Pull that up. I'm going to put the actual illustrated output.
Okay, here we go. So shared screen, right? So now the funny thing is anybody watching who's seen any of my prototypes in action, and that includes Buyer, as you question your own ability on this, like, mine are incredible. This is so far above the scratchings that I make. It's hilarious. And we have Razor Beat Canyon and whatnot. So I thought it was great. I was floored when I saw the prototype, and so don't question yourself on that. I mean, this is amazing. Like, if I was talking to a brand new designer, I would have been like, honestly, you did way too much work before you submitted this. Like, you go to a proto spiel or you answer a design question on a forum and trying to help some people, and they're like, well, how far along should it be? And I'm like, make it ugly. We'll fix it and we'll help you make it beautiful. What's the latest project you're working on? Oh, I'm helping Scott Almes with his 17-page book of illustrations he did himself that he turned in. But that's not for you. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have really worked any other way, right? Like, it really helped us see right away how awesome it was. So,
and that was like such a key thing to have to show is how the maps like worked and how the world could look in this book and stuff like that, because I mean, it might look just kind of subtle on like Kickstarter pages and stuff like that, but I mean, we got like 17 game boards in this game. Like, it's a ambitious project from the art, all the variability into it that comes into it from the encounters and things like that. Like, it's a little bit unassuming for how much is into this game.
Yeah.
I can personally attest to how much of an understatement it was with how much work went into this game.
Yeah, it is, and it's been a joy to work on, and work with you on the content and things like that. And we certainly would love to bring more volumes of Almanac, both for Baluria and other worlds, to Kickstarter and fans of Kolossal and Scott in the future. So with that in mind, if we don't have any further questions in the chat, I think we can go ahead and wrap things up. This will be posted, curated on the Facebook page for Kolossal. We will also be uploading it to BGG and the Kolossal Games YouTube channel. So we will keep an eye on all those places for any of you watching it later and try to answer your questions. Of course, keep in mind that the Kickstarter for Almanac The Dragon Road ends this Thursday. So get in there and help everybody unlock some more stretch goals and exciting content, and help us bring even more of this wonderful world that Scott has created to life for everyone. And we'll see you next week with another stream. So, Scott, it was great talking to you.
It's great talking to you. See you, everybody.
Bye.